Today is a very special day.
It is.
It's a very special day. It is the 40th anniversary of the exploding whale down in Florence, Oregon, when a sperm whale washed up on shore, and the Oregon Highway Department decided they'd use dynamite to blow it up. Well, that was a great idea until blubber started flying everywhere, and that explosion threw guts and chunks of the whale 800 feet up in the air, and
look at the cars.
Over 800 feet away.
Look at that.
Look at that. Yeah, that was a big piece of blubber landed on it.
Wow.
That was 40 years ago. Paul Lindman was the reporter.
And Doug Brazil was the photographer. He was the one who caught all of this on camera, and we're going to talk to Doug right now. Doug, so take us back, go back 40 years ago, and tell us about that whole situation and what you remember.
Well, it was really kind of bizarre, Helen. You have to realize that we were told by the news director that we had a story developing on the Oregon beach where they had a dead whale, and the Department of Transportation wanted to blow it up. He decided that was a pretty interesting story and put us on a little private plane and sent Paul and I, rookie reporter, photographer, down there to the Florence beach to check it out.
And when that whale blew up,
well, yeah, there was the big countdown, a typical explosion of 3, 2, 1, and then the thing went off. And of course, Paul and I were rolling film, and it was film in those days, Dave. And we were looking up in the sky at maybe not 800 feet, but there were pieces of blubber that were the size of, well, you saw it, the size of a car roof that were flying around, and they went over the top of us and then sprayed this horrible mist over everything, including us, the camera, and it smelled horrible.
Yeah, I was going to say, so describe the smell. And then didn't you end up smelling like that for the rest of the day? And
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we had to stay down there while they finished cleaning up the rest of the pieces, and then, you know, bulldozing them into the hole, as it were. And, of course, we just reeked of this stuff. And how do you describe dead whale smell? I mean, it's the worst possible smell you can imagine. Then we had to get back in this airplane and then fly back to Portland. And I swear the poor pilot was about as sick as you could possibly get.
Now, Doug, we were talking this morning in remembering this story. The whale blowing up as it did, was it because there was too much dynamite or not enough?
Well, that's a question for the engineers. I mean, it looked to us like they used enough to get most of it done, but the idea was, according to the engineer, was to try to bring it into small enough, or break it up into small enough pieces so seagulls and other critters would take it away. Well, as you can tell, that didn't work.
Paul has mentioned this quite a bit, Paul Lindman, and I'm wondering if you're equally as surprised at how long this story has lived. It is an international story.
Yeah, it is, Dave. When we did the story and got it on the air finally, we walked away from that story and felt that we'd never see it again. And then suddenly, 20 years later, practically, Dave Barry wrote about it, and I thought it was an incredibly interesting piece. I thought it was the funniest story he'd ever heard. And so there we were, and then it hit the internet, and that's history.
And your history, too, as well.
Yeah,
you're down in history.
Right.
Well, you're in the history
in
book.
In the history book,
as
opposed to history.
Yeah,
well, Doug, thank you so much for joining us this morning and taking us back 40 years. That was fun.
Let me ask you very quickly,
Absolutely.
Do you ever once in a while still smell that smell?
Thankfully, it's gone, but yes, every once in a while you remember how bad it was. And it was bad, Dave.
Very good, thank you. Good
Doug,
to see you, Doug.
thank you so much. Thanks for
I
joining
guess
us.
if you've experienced that kind of smell as he describes it, you know, having a cat box that's overly full doesn't bother you anymore, does it? You know, I can handle that.
I don't think any scent could.
I had whale blubber all over me. So.
Too funny. Well, I think that's really interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, Paul Lindman, who was a reporter with Doug, was flown to, I forget where, but it was, I want to say like Amsterdam, but I could be wrong, to speak to a university or some group about the exploding whale. The curiosity around the world is fascinating.
Yeah, and that's thanks to the internet.
Yeah, that is indeed thanks to the internet. Yeah, that internet, boy, that's gonna pay off.
That internet thing.
That's gonna stay there.